not have to talk at all about what the hell, who you are, as what labels you have.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'd much prefer not knowing what people do for a living. Like, I don't care. Like, I actually don't like it. Like, I don't want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to me. Sure. Find it interesting to figure out what people do and why it makes them tick. But when I'm in a setting where I'm just meeting somebody, and this is like the whole party joke, right? When you go to like a party, or like, the holidays are coming up, Christmas this and Friendsgiving this, and you've got like oh, so what do you do? It's like, there's nothing like I shut down. I completely shut down. I know that the intention is pure, but I don't want to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about like the real shit in life. And that's not like what everybody feels safe to do. And that's okay.
What's up, guys? Welcome to the Invictus Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is an Olympic medalist, an entrepreneur, and an artist. One of my favorite humans, making her second appearance on the show, Caroline Burckle. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I feel very honored to be on here twice.
Oh, we're going to have you on so many more times. You have so much knowledge and nuggets and stories and innovations in between those ears that hopefully we can share it with our awesome community today.
Yeah, well, I look forward to it. It's an interesting time to be doing this, because it's funny you say that, because a lot of what's in my brain right now feels like it's like leveling out. It's like, I'm not as sharp as, oh no, like I hope that I have like great things to say today. And it just goes to show you like the human condition. We all think about stuff like that, like, are you ready for something? Are you sharp enough? Do you have enough to say?
I love that you articulate it that way. Like, those are things that I think before every single podcast, before every single workout, before every single coaching interaction is, am I ready? Am I well equipped? Will I have the right thing to say or the right frequency to share? And I feel like that's something that everybody navigating the human experience goes through. But you do such a beautiful job of articulating that and putting it out into the universe, versus most of us like practice the art of like, let me lock this away. Let me put on this like certain fabricated role and like really show them that I'm supposed to be here and I'm doing the thing. And I just love how honest you are. And I think it gives other people, including myself, the permission to be more honest.
Yeah, thank you. But right before this, I was actually, doing a casual Instagram scroll, and on my art account, which it's like such a breath of fresh air to be on that, because there's so much beauty and abstract, and it's not it's not what's on my other account, for example, my personal account. And a post popped up that said, "Thinking is not for everyone, period." It was like written in like an artistic way. And I was like, damn, that's exactly what I feel all the time. Like, I don't have to think so hard. I can just embody what I'm feeling or experiencing and share that in an authentic way, instead of trying to script it so closely and perform, right? Like that performance that we're so used to, especially as athletes. Like, at a young age, you've got to step up, you've got to perform, like even on a podcast or even in a conversation. It's like, no, you can just feel it, embody it. I don't have to think so hard about what I'm going to say or how it's going to come off, or, but it was just like divine timing, like 30 minutes ago, I'm reading that and I was like, damn, that's exactly what I needed to read right now.
I love that so much. It brings up this thought-provoking concept that I think you and Rich Roll may have described this a little bit, and that is, there's more to the human experience than what meets the eye. And sometimes we're trying to label things, we're trying to categorize them, we're trying to provide order and sequence and deep understanding. But the beauty of art and the eloquence of music are that they articulate kind of what is felt within the soul in a very spiritual nature without really saying anything. And you and I both know the magic of, sometimes when you're just around somebody, they don't need to say anything. Just their sheer presence and the holding of space is comforting. And, will you kind of share your thoughts on this concept a little bit, because it's something I've been trying to digest a little bit so I can better share it with others.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to grasp sometimes, because when you want so badly to figure out why, or to figure out the meaning of everything, like every single thing in your life, if you go back through your past, or if you're looking to the future even, or if you're experiencing your present moment and you're trying to put two and two together, it's like, well, that happened because of this. And like simple things, right? Well, my stomach hurts because I did this morning, or, it's like we're trying so hard to make meaning even out of the smallest things that can snowball into these bigger things. Of course, things such as trauma, or, death, or endings, beginnings, whatever you want to call it. And again, like I just talked about this, but sometimes you just read things at the perfect time. And yesterday I read, sometimes it's a lesson in releasing control.
Mm.
And that's something that I think as humans, we usually struggle to do, because control, first of all, is a way for us to feel safe. It's a way for us to feel like we have a grasp on whatever it is that we're doing. It's a way for us to feel like we're higher up and we're succeeding. And I think that we get lost in that so easily. I know I do. Mm-hmm. But I simply storied that yesterday, and I've gotten more responses from that single story than I have in anything in a really long time, just because I think so many people resonate with that. It's like we are all trying to make so much meaning out of it, but really, what are we trying to control? And I think starting with that question is really helpful. And that's something that I've been personally reflecting on this chapter of my life right now. It's like, wow, I've had a lot of loss in a year, just like losses. It feels like heavy loss, like, oh, can't believe this is happening to me. Like, why? And you make all these meanings, like, okay, you lose 2 grandparents in a week, and, and you try and understand why. And it's really like, what am I holding on to so tight right now? Like, what am I afraid of releasing? And anyway, I go off on these tangents.
The word that comes to mind when you talk about this, though, is the word surrender. And I think that word has a unique meaning in our world, because I don't know about you, but the vision that comes to mind is like doing this. And that almost shows like, hey, white flag, too much vulnerability. I'm relinquishing control, as you said. I'm now lower than the other thing. And I almost think like surrender can also be like the way you wade in the ocean, and the waves can kind of take you in different places and sometimes help you navigate things and take you to places you never imagined. You're like, oh, I actually didn't even know this existed, because I was always fighting. And I think as humans, we're in this unique dichotomy between fight and surrender. And somewhere on that spectrum is the element of control. And I mean, you and I have talked rigorously around exposure therapy, and you can't really fight the elements. You have to surrender to them. And that gives you the opportunity to then control your physiology. And I think that's where all of us can have an element of control, that grounding, that center, that tethered ethos around I am in control of my breath. My breath helps regulate my thought patterns. And based on that, I can surrender to the external world. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind there is a conversation I had, I don't know, maybe a year ago or something at this time. And it was with my somatic coach, Sarah Baldwin, and I said to her, well, if I surrender, then that means I've given up. Because that is the thought process that goes through really anyone's brain. I mean, I don't want to like categorize us all in the same, not every human's the same.
It's pretty consistent though.
I would bet 9 times out of 10, if you're sitting across the table at coffee with somebody and you're talking to them about, well, why don't you want to surrender? They would say, well, like, that's just, you're just kind of like giving up. Like you're sort of throwing in the towel, right? Like, And I think you really have to become aware of what that feeling of surrender, like you said, feels like in your body through different modalities to also understand what surrender means. But I think there's a huge distinction between giving up and surrendering. And giving up is a self-sabotage. It's a way to protect yourself so that you don't fail. It's a way to explain, have a reason, an excuse, because you're afraid of succeeding. Surrender, and this is just I'm not like reading these definitions, you know, daily or anything, but these are just my experiences. Surrendering is literally, if you visualize, and I talk to my friend Katie about this a lot, like if you visualize just letting go, like just literally letting go of the reins and like actually feel that you're just releasing that, so that you have two independent parties living their, you know, experiences, whatever you're letting go of, then you can see it as a way of growth and not this like doomsday failure potential. And that's been helpful for me to sort of visualize, okay, this isn't like stomping on something and giving up and failing and self-sabotage. This is just simply a separation of expectations, of control, of obsessing, you know, and creating what you want it to be so badly, whatever it is, job, life, relationships, career, or that goes with job, you know, whatever that is. So I think that that's the first thing that came to mind when you said that, is just the distinction there, because I think it's important, because it's whether we think it or not, sometimes when you surrender, we're afraid of letting go of that control because it feels like you're just giving up. Well, it is what it is, you know, like that's my least favorite term. It's like, well, everything is what it is, you know, like don't give up on that. But like, what can you surrender in this experience versus just being like, screw it, I'm gonna throw my hands up, like I don't give a shit. It's very different. Two different things.
What I'm hearing here is such a unique way of describing the redefining of phrases and terms. And sometimes I think our brains become so attached to Webster's dictionary that this particular word associates this meaning. Oh, that's what this means in our life. Well, it's like, well, does it have to mean that? And that's where the creative mind comes in, right? Where there's the unique, innovative questioning around, well, that's what it's been up until this point, but that doesn't mean that's what it has to be moving forward. And I think context and conversation and uniquely understanding different terms. One of my favorite questions for people is, what do you see? And that can be in relation to movement. That can be in relation to what's going on in the world. That can be in relation to a piece of art, or, you know, what did you observe from that show that we watched? Or what were some highlights that stood out to you? Because what does that do? It creates a safe space for understanding. Oh, these are your lenses on the situation. I actually saw that way differently. Let's have a conversation around it with the general understanding of we can disagree, but still respect one another.
Yes. Oh gosh, that's a big theme, obviously, right now. But I do agree with that. I think when you look at social media, for example, and there's so much goodness, and there's so much amazing information coming at you, and it's easy to scroll through, or YouTube, or whatever the heck it is. I'm just saying social media because it's pretty prevalent, to read or listen to something and be like, that's it. Like, that's it. Like, that's what I need to do. Those are the things that I need to do. If that person did it, I got to do it. And yes, sure, you can try it and dabble and give an effort at whatever it is. But ultimately, again, going back to your point, what do you see here? Like, what's your interpretation of it? How do you understand what that information is? The advice someone's giving, the morning routine someone's doing, the food someone's eating, the books they're reading. Like, do you want to do that for you, or are you trying to do that because you're supposed to do that? And again, that goes back to that control thing. Well, if I can just do do what everybody wants me to do, then I'll be successful, versus like, what is it that I really feel inside of my body that I need to do in order to grow? And everyone will be different. And you can take nuggets from everything. And actually, I just listened to the Whitney Cummings podcast with Rich, like half of last night, the rest of it this morning. And she brings up that topic in that conversation a lot too, is, you know, with her AA meetings and all that, it's kind of like, yes, you can listen to these experiences and be like, yeah, me too. Mm-hmm, same, totally. But also, like, everyone's experience is different. Like, what does that mean for you? And how can you interpret that for yourself and take responsibility and grow and move forward and learn how to, navigate the highs, the lows, when to let go, when to go all in. Like, how do you know when to do all of these things that we are supposed to be doing? You know, like, how you don't have to do any of those things.
Totally. The thing that's floating to the surface right now is so much, by the way, but the first thing that I think will unlock the rest, my brain's always trying to triage concepts,
I like it.
is that most people are living lives of quiet desperation. They are funneled to a particular lane based on some sort of societal trigger. That can be a conversation, a book, what they're observing, who's getting love or validation for said concept, where the money is, where they think it will be easier on them and on their life and maybe their circle of trust or their family. And then as a byproduct, people kind of get pigeonholed or they get stuck. They get married to the ideation or the idea of said concept. Trident Coffee is sponsoring this episode of the Invictus Mindset Podcast. My guys over at Trident taught me something really important this last year, that we are all a bundle of stories, both good and bad, and everything in between. At Trident, they're storytellers. All of their cold brews remind their customers that they are part of something bigger than themselves. They help create connections through symbology and storytelling that engage their customers on an emotional level, and this distinguishes them from other coffee brands. You can find Trident in Imperial Beach and in Coronado. They offer over 14 plus nitro cold brews along with dairy-free options. You can find the perfect brew and pair it with one of their treats from their keto bakery. All these options will allow you to support your health and fitness journey with Trident Coffee. They're more than just a coffee company. You can check them out over at tridentcoffee.com and use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Once again, that's tridentcoffee.com. Use code Invictus20 for 20% off online and in tap rooms. Take your coffee experience to the next level. Two important factors for us over at Invictus Mindset are true care and attention to detail. My friends over at RX Gear have been bringing innovative fitness tools to the market since 2009. From their award-winning Evo speed ropes to their amazing gymnastics grips to their line of inflatable fitness equipment, they're constantly looking to problem solve within the fitness industry. They're always allowing us to have our gear work for us rather than against us. Hop on over to RX Gear and use discount code Invictus Mindset to shop their latest cutting edge gear. Have your gear work with you and not against you. But I actually think it's really beneficial. One of the main things I actually do like about our education system is the concept of just like trying different things and then realizing like, oh, I actually thought I was going to like that, but that actually taught me what I didn't want. Next. All right, I thought I was going to like that too. And then I got into the weeds and the processes and procedures, and I really didn't like that. For me, it was kind of like physical therapy. I love the concept of it, but in going to school for it, I realized a lot of that industry, at least from my experience, was people not really wanting to get better, wanting to reap the benefits from car accidents, wanting me to sit there and do modalities to do it for them versus it being a collaborative approach. And that's just a small, tiny example of in my brain, I created this idea of like, oh, I'm going to be a doctorate of physical therapy. I'm going to be titled doctor. I'm going to get validation from the world. Here is the average salary of somebody in that role. And I created this whole mental psychology around the life that I thought I was supposed to live. Thankfully, I kind of dabbled in that arena and I was like, I kind of like that, but I also don't really give a shit about the title because all of us possess the title of human. And that's what I'm really engaged in now is this unique concept that all of us want this title. They want the validation, the intro of the podcast. Should I listen to this based on the resume of the person that you have on the episode? Right. It's like, no, just listen to the context, right? Like everybody's looking for that like billboard label of like, what do you do? Based on your answer, that's going to determine my level of respect. I'm also going to like think about how much money you make and how many followers you have. And if you have that blue check mark, and if you have all those things, then I'll respect you. It's like, wow, all those things can be gone so fast. Let's dabble in this concept of what I said originally, which is most people are living lives of quiet desperation. How do we use vulnerability and storytelling to allow people to have that deep light that's inside of them to come out and shine or peek behind the curtain, just like Banksy behind me, to really explore the human experience and what makes us uniquely come alive versus the societal pressures and expectations based on validation for some sort of analytics?
Right. Gosh, I could go on down so many rabbit holes with the title thing.
Pick one and let's start. I'm on Rant City right now.
Well, look, I like it because I have been reflecting a lot about titles, quote unquote, relevancy when it comes to, society. So I may dive into that for a second, because obviously, okay, so basically, you and I both get it. We're professional athletes. You retire. You go through the identity crisis. You're trying to find, who am I? What am I going to do with my life? To your point, you dabble in 20 things. I went to fashion school. I went to get my sports psych master's. I started my own business of like wellness coaching or something in like 2012, literally, like before it was even popular. I worked with Lululemon, opening showrooms and things like that. Like I was just like doing all of this random shit. And you learn so much, like you said, about what you want, what you don't want. But in the process, you're desperately seeking that title, at least I was, or that who can I be next? Who would people approve of? Or what kind of validation could I get from this? So now that I've had time to reflect, I go and I start a business. We run a business for 7 years. And just recently, we looked at each other 6 months ago, my business partner and I, and she's an Olympic medalist, multiple gold medals from 3 different Olympics. And we sit there and we say, we don't want to do this forever. Like we're exhausted and we also see more for ourselves. And it was like, holy shit, how much of a gut punch can it be to then run your own business, have this title as like the 2 Olympians that run this like sports psychology consulting for youth. Like what a big thing. Like, oh, they're doing such great work for the world. You close, you decide to move on. Like we could have kept it going. Like it would have been great, but we just didn't, we didn't want to, there's a lot to it. It's like, you've got to fundraise and do all these things, take the next level. And we just didn't see our future like that. We both have different interests. And it's like, your title's gone again. It's gone in the blink of an eye. You're not relevant anymore. You don't have the same stature. You now have to start over, right? And these are just my thoughts. These are the thoughts that go through my head. It's not like anyone telling me this. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I'm back to that place of quiet desperation, right? For a couple of weeks. And I was like, holy shit. Like, I want to be understood. I don't feel like I know who I am again. Like now I got to start over. I'm completely burnt out. Now I have completely cut ties and I'm grieving Caroline, the Olympic athlete. Like if I don't go back into the sports field, I'm done with that. Like that title is gone. And that's a huge thing that I think it doesn't matter if you're an athlete or if you know, stop going down the doctor route, or if you're, you know, studying to be a lawyer and you decide to switch careers, and all of a sudden it's like you do kind of lose that sense of identity of who you were becoming based on the title. So you got to dial it down, take all the layers off, and figure out like, who are you becoming not based on the title? Who would you be if all that's gone? And that has been the most humbling experience of my life so far, like beyond anything else, just sitting with the whole concept of the title of this, that validation, that person, that, oh my gosh, you're doing such great things for the world, being told that every single day, right? Haven't been told that at all. Not once since we decided to move forward. And it's absolutely like eye-opening to go through something like that, to where you realize I was really basing a lot of my validation on that.
Mm-hmm.
That specific thing. Like what happens when it's all gone?
I honor so much you describing this, because it brings up this concept of what I'm seeing a lot in the world right now, which is we're loving things and using people versus loving people and using things. What I would really appreciate is, you know, if somebody explored someone like you, and fortunately we get to do this today, and that is, you know, exploring, hey, what are the transferable skills, right? You've acquired so many different tools in your toolbox, so many different lessons. Your network is probably above and beyond more than I could probably quantify. And that's deep because it's based on real connection versus just a transactional connection, which is a different type of network. That's more of an association, or like a, hey, I know this person on LinkedIn, versus a true ethos and mission-based value connection. And I just see this a lot in the world where people are thinking I should be loved, validated, and given the job because of everything I've gotten or that I get. But what if the conversation flipped and became, you've done so much, you've acquired so much. How do we give? How do we give more of that to the world in a human standpoint versus the title standpoint versus what's the ROI? Like, I think these deeper, more meaningful things really highlight and bold and italicize in super big, sexy, artistic letters the word vulnerability. Because at the end of the day, when you strip down everything, that is the connecting layer of all of us. We're afraid to be seen. We're afraid to talk about what keeps us up at night. What is our greatest fear? You know, Jonah Hill talked about it on Stutz, which you and I can discuss here shortly. And that is, they put that picture of, you know, the heavier set guy that had acne and the upbringing. And he went through this unique transformation, thinking the success of his career and all these different external validations would make him feel loved. And there's just this moment where he just unapologetically is authentically himself. And he just throws it out there that, like, no matter what the world sees and what I've done, like, this is still the guy inside of me. And that's something that I battle every single day. And I think all of us do to some extent of, you know, why can't we be validated for the depth of conversation, how we love, how we give, versus the goddamn resume?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely right. And oh gosh, that Stutz movie, I mean, we could talk about that forever, but part of the thing that I loved the most is that he doesn't even want to promote. Jonah Hill, you know, has been advised not even to promote his own movies or, you know, his own shows and things, because it's part of his healing that he doesn't have to be seen as this figure, right? Like he wants to be seen as more than that. And when you really go back to what makes you tick, like if you go back to your childhood or, when you're a teenager or whatever, and you think about when did you feel the most loved and supported? And what were the values that you craved in that space? And typically, I mean, if we take away, all of our quote unquote childhood traumas and all the things that we conditioned and acquired over our years, which every human has, and there's nothing like, it's normal. But I feel like most kids or most teens would say something like, when someone listened to me, or when I felt like I was understood, or when I felt like I could be myself, right? And I'm just kind of dumbing down the terminology of this, of like, if you asked a child or if you asked a teen, what makes you feel the best in that way. And there's a part of me that sometimes gets a little sad, because I do think the pendulum swung, and maybe it's swinging back a little bit, but to the extreme of when I get a lot of likes, when I have this kind of stature, when I win these medals, when I do all these things. And I do, like I said, I do think it's swinging back, but I think that has been really challenging for our culture, because we're losing the ability to just be. We're
quantifying everything. Everything has a numerical value so that there's a ranking system. And that removes the element of critical thinking, because it now, it fits in a box, it fits in a system. And I think it's our humble human attempt to deeply understand what life is, what is our meaning, what is our purpose. If we can't compare, if we can't quantify, how do we create a measure? How do we, show to the investors or to the sponsors or to all the different people that we are worthy of their attention or their dollar or their love? And I can't help but think about Dave Chappelle here, because you look at all the different artists in the world and podcasters and different brands, and they're in bed together, they're connecting with everybody, they're promoting this, the affiliate code, that check out, I'm making an appearance here doing this, and all those things are great. This is not to put them down by any means, but Dave Chappelle's never played that game. Dave Chappelle said, I'm Dave Chappelle, and no amount of money is going to dictate my life. I'm going to dictate my life. And if that means I need to press pause, I'm going to find a way to make it work, because I'm living true to me and my values. And I really admire that. I think there's extreme.
I do too. Yeah.
Like, I can't really think of the adjective to describe it other than he's just being himself. And why are we all so afraid of that? And it's this,
because it's control.
It's control, and it's fear, right? Like, oh, if I don't give in to that, brand, then I'm not going to get into their algorithm, or I'm not going to make that money. And then we create these external branched stories around, I won't be able to provide, or this project is going to die, or I'm not going to be able to create opportunities for other people. And I don't know, the creativity doesn't operate that way. I don't think you can streamline or box life. I think you explore life. And that's what I really gravitated towards the first time I met you, was like, man, she doesn't have the answers. Neither do I. I don't think any of us do. And any of us that are pretending to have the answers, we're liars. And I want to be around truth seekers. And I think the truth is hidden in the navigation of the experience. It's the tiptoeing, the feeling, the deep, vulnerable conversations to take down the shield, let the barriers down, strip it down all the way to its absolute, just tremendous honesty, and be like, all right, let's go for it. Right.
Yes. And when you were talking just now, and you were saying the part about, when you and I connected, and you have that, okay, this person doesn't have all the answers. This person doesn't really know the outcome. The funny thing is if I reflect back on that specific time, that was when I was so desperately trying to seek the answers and holding on so tight. But it's interesting what comes out. It's like, I want so badly to not be that way. So you'll put on the performance of trying to be that way, which adds the other layer to the complexity of this authenticity conversation. And, but again, you know, it just goes back to control. It goes back to, what can I control? How can I feel in control? Because if I feel in control, then I'm doing something right. And then people will approve of me. And then I will look like I know what I'm doing, which is like what I just told you. Like, I'll look like I know what I'm doing and I'll have it all figured out. And then I'll be accepted, and then everything will start to work out for me.
Yeah, totally.
Right?
I wanna bookmark you there for a quick second and go back to that first time I met you. And I want to share something with you. I don't know if I've ever told this to you, but I think you'll appreciate it. I think others will as well. I think the true art of listening is more than what people say. It's observing human behavior. It's feeling a frequency, the tone at which people speak, the speed at which people speak, where their eyes go, their body language. And, you know, I met you at a breath and exposure seminar. First of all, the sheer vulnerability to attend something like that tells you, I'm here to support people that I care about. I'm trying to support me. I am exploring these elements of my physiology, breath, which it sounds like a really simple concept when utilized with the triggers from an external person giving you cues to use it in a certain way can elicit down-regulating or anxiety, all kinds of unique sensations. The ice bath is the true truth seeker, especially when it's like dumping that much ice and you have eyes on you and you're like, I'm not supposed to look cold or scared or anxiety ridden. I'm supposed to look tough for the picture. And all of us are going through those things. But the unique thing was none of us had met each other before. And we went through that generalized experience together, surrendering, you know, some of the challenges, because you can't really fake it when you're hit by tremendous cold or heat or breath stuff. You're just like put into a state and you have to be like, okay, I am trying my best to manage these sensations as best as possible. But to take it a step further, we're all sitting in the sauna. None of us know each other. And you took the lead to share. And you started conversing with other people and connecting. That takes courage, right? To share. It's one of those things that like you actually have to practice the art of how to articulate elements of your story. You didn't resume drop. I actually didn't know what you did at the time. I was just hearing your story and how you connected. And then I realized, oh, she's speaking kind of fast. This is coming from a place of gentle anxiety because she's actually seeking connection in a very like weird state. It's almost like being in an elevator with somebody. You're like, hey.
Yeah.
Hey.
We're all sitting like on top of each other.
Yeah, we're on top of each other. We're sitting there shivering. And it's this unique time where it's like, you know what? I'm going to try to share. I'm going to try to connect. And there's uniqueness to that. That's listening at a level that's more around emotional intelligence, like really trying to understand each person. I was doing that, like where I was like trying to understand like what's their story, and just trying my best to be uniquely curious. And, you know, while simultaneously observing everybody's perception of different and unique challenges. But that's what I wish people would do, is not, oh my gosh, these people are talking. Why are they talking right now? I'm just so cold and I'm stuck in my own thought patterns and I'm irritated because I'm so cold. And you know what I mean? It's like, hold on, press pause there. That's a stress response that was created by an external factor. That's actually none of these people's fault. What if rather than judging them for that unique action, we just pause and we seek to understand each individual story, try to feel a nonverbal connection. How is each one of these individuals operating? And if people get anything out of the conversation today, something that I've obsessed about over these last few episodes is seek to understand. Listen more than just what's said. Observe and feel, because all of us innately, from a human characteristic, feel something. If there is an empty room, somebody enters that room, there is a feeling. It doesn't make it right or wrong, good or bad. It's just a frequency that is exchanged that none of us can really comprehend or really describe, but we can navigate it through different forms of art and verbiage and articulation of like, hey, I think this is what I'm feeling. I'm going to try to describe it to you. But it just goes back to that concept of make everything art, including how you observe and how you listen to other human beings in a vulnerable state.
Yes. And that's another Webster Dictionary conversation about the term feeling. And I know that it's been discussed on so many different podcasts and so many different conversations, and, to feel your feelings, and that feelings are information. Like, feelings are not this sentence that you're going to have. Like, you're not just like slapped on with this label and then you have to like, woe is me. Like, that's not what a feeling is, but that's sort of what we've been taught is like, put your feelings aside, right? Like, that feelings are this soft thing. And truthfully, we need more of that. We need more people observing and feeling situations so that they can then understand what that information is telling themselves and be able to open up to that specific situation, whatever it is, and not shut down. Because I think shutting down is everyone's go-to in a lot of ways. It really is. Let me just be less of this and put this aside, and I need to conform to this environment in this sauna with 3 people sitting on top of each other, and I'm going to make sure that everybody feels comfortable and that I'm not going to rock the boat. I'm just going to nod my head and go along with whatever is small talk, right? That's being said. And I'm always seeking that deeper level of connection with people, because I think that that's what I was lacking in my sport. That's what I was lacking. I didn't have that deep connection with other humans. It was very much you're here to get the job done, show up, in this situation, show up for your 3 hours for this seminar, get the information, do the thing, and leave. And sure, like, that can be a lot of people's viewpoint, but if you're rushing through everything and you're not actually absorbing or experiencing or observing or understanding others in that experience, like, what did you just do? Like, what was that transaction? And again, that goes back to everything we've been talking about with regards to control and just, the amount of information we're receiving. And if I can just get that and go, that's all I need. I just need to get it and go. I don't want to dive any deeper into this. I'm not saying everything needs to be a campfire 3-hour conversation, but it's a feeling. It's a feeling that you have around people to where you feel safe to be yourself, have a conversation, not have to talk at all about what the hell, who you are, as what labels you have. Like, I'd much prefer not knowing what people do for a living. Like, I don't care. Like, I actually don't like it. Like, I don't want to know. And it's interesting to me. Sure. Find it interesting to figure out what people do and why it makes them tick. But when I'm in a setting where I'm just meeting somebody, like, there's nothing worse, in my opinion. And this is like the whole party joke, right? When you go to like a party, or like, the holidays are coming up, Christmas this and Friendsgiving this, and you've got like so what do you do? It's like, there's nothing like I shut down. I completely shut down. I know that the intention is pure, but I don't want to talk about that. I want to talk about like the real shit in life. And that's not like what everybody feels safe to do. And that's okay. But it is a place that I think we can all grow into, is learning less about the titles and what people, who they are and what they've accomplished and how much money they have and, what they're going to do tomorrow and how they're going to achieve the next thing. And really just seek to understand, hey, like, yo, you live in town. Awesome. Like, I say, like, just starting to have more of like you are a being.
I think you can answer the question in a very cryptic sense too. Like, whenever I get that question, I like to say, well, I help people. And then they ask how. And then that unlocks the conversation, right? Where it's like, oh, or, sometimes I'll say something like, oh, I use fitness as a tool to help people, reach their peak expression, or I'll verbalize it different ways, but then it comes full circle and they're like, oh, like that's super cool. Like, fitness has played, this role in my story. And then you can kind of start like working your way backwards and trying to understand, hey, how are you? Where did you come from? What are some of your thought patterns? What are you going through now? Like, how do we connect on this spiritual human side versus this transactional side of like, oh, that's super cool. Hit me with your business card. Like, let's connect on a collaboration later. And there's a time and a place for those types of things, but it's more so just like respect, really. And I think it's respecting life. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I like that. Respect. I like that a lot because that it just gets me going on feeling this recent experience, right? Where we decided to close our business and we're giving ourselves until, X amount of time, to move on and create a new life. But this time period, Rebecca and I looked at each other in the eyes and we're like, we're just going to be. We're not going to jump into the next thing because it's the right thing to do. We're okay, financially, thankful that we can just sit here and just be. And I tell you what, the growth in that conversation when, it can be uncomfortable when you talk about what you do to people. I'm not the only person that feels that way. I know so many people like don't know how to articulate what they do, especially if you're an entrepreneur. You're like what you just said, the cryptic thing where you're like caught in the middle and you're like, this is awkward. I don't really want to talk about this, but like I do, but I don't, I do on this level, but I don't on this level. And now it's so freeing to be like, oh, nothing right now. I'm actually just being, because I just had this huge chapter of my life end. So I'm just giving this space to grow and to expand. And it's like, I never would have thought that is like the most freeing explanation you can give, because it's almost more trapping to give a specific title.
It almost puts you in shackles a little bit. And it reminds me of when Stutz and Jonah Hill were discussing. Jonah Hill goes, it's so interesting because in this process, I've been trying to figure out what Stutz does. And he listens. He doesn't really tell me what to do or give me tons of advice. And it's fascinating. It's ironic, actually, because you come to a therapist to try to get advice. But what's funny is when I go to all my friends, they give me all the advice in the world and all kinds of paralysis by analysis. And I go to them to actually just listen and be able to vent. But then when I go to the therapist, I get a higher return on investment for my time and frequency and the deconstruction of some of my thoughts and emotions. And in reality, he just listens. This episode is brought to you by MUSH. My friends over at MUSH created an incredibly cool product of ready-to-eat overnight oats. And for those of you that listen to the podcast often, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And MUSH has done just that, as their products have no more than 7 clean ingredients that are dairy-free, gluten-free, with no added sugar. MUSH started right here at Invictus, as they had a vision to create convenient, healthy, and clean nutrition. And this landed them on Shark Tank, where the famous Mark Cuban invested in them. Now they're found in retailers all over the country, including Costco, Sprouts, Target, and Whole Foods. Check out my friends over at www.eatmush.com. And it's fascinating because we always feel like we got to do, but sometimes being is the place where you truly like learn and I guess find a heightened level of enlightenment, I guess.
Yes. And I'm going to take this on to that next level of questions that we receive just based on career and life and projected what we're supposed to do, and is what's next? What's next for you, Bryce? Like what's next, and it's exciting because if you have something you're excited about sharing, that can be exciting. But it's interesting in this experience of mine and just kind of going back to figuring out feeling that you get when you are asked that question, like diving into that. Cause at first I was so triggered. I was like, if one more person asks me this question, I am going to scream. Mm-hmm. But then, and I know their intent is pure, but it's also, can we be okay sitting in not knowing? Like, can we be okay in the uncertainty of life? And that's what Stutz talks about. And that's what prompted this is, do you remember how he said, like, there's 3 things that we all have, and or it's like trust, uncertainty, and I forget the third, mm-hmm. but it's the 3 non-negotiables that we all experience, mm-hmm. that we need in life. We need trust, we need uncertainty, and then maybe a life of work or a life of something. But I was like, oh, when that part came on, it's like, that's exactly right. Like, we're so uncomfortable not knowing what other people are going to do next. And it's a fascinating thing.
It devalues the moment. It makes it where we're labeling based on the past. We're uncertain based on the future. So then we're never really in the now. And that's such a cliche thing to say, right? Like, be where your feet are and, say, but like to actually do that, I think it's a uniqueness that I think needs to be talked about more. And what comes to mind is choosing to engage in the moment rather than just labeling it as the mundane or distracting and deflecting with the phone or Netflix or working out or, all the different things. What if in the moment you choose to do a body scan? You choose to notice. Something that I love doing every morning is when I'll let the dogs out, I just observe, right? What are they doing? Oh, they're going for different smells. It's the same freaking yard they were in the night before, but their curiosity leads them to believe like, oh, maybe there was an animal here. Maybe, a bird flew by, or there's different smells. It's every moment is an opportunity to begin again. And then all of a sudden you're uniquely in that space because you're noticing things that previously weren't on your radar. Actually, I got to get this done. I got that done. Check that off the list. And it's just this do. But in the doing, you forget to be. And so I think surrendering to the moment allows you to really like pull in some of the uniqueness of life of like, man, the cloud structure is really beautiful. The way the sun is hitting the mountains or hitting those flowers in the backyard is really, really cool. Or, whatever the specificity that kind of gets your eyebrows to perk in that moment, it's extreme gratitude for just being in that space.
Yeah. Yes. And observing, going back to that, I think when I've reflected a bit on that specific observing things and seeing what's out there instead of looking down at my phone and rushing through life and finding that next thing and what do I got to do tomorrow. And I know we hear about it all the time. Like we hear this nonstop, like, like you said, be present, be where your feet are and just be. We hear it all the time. But what's the fear of, again, I always ask myself, why am I afraid to be present? And again, it's lack of control. And I keep going back to this because I think it's such a powerful concept for so many people to understand that when you remove yourself from the present moment, you are trying to control whatever is next and whatever is going to be on the projected radar or whatever you want to do. It doesn't mean when you are present, it doesn't mean you're giving up on your goals. Again, it doesn't mean you're throwing in the towel. It doesn't mean you don't want to be motivated. It doesn't mean you don't want to achieve the next thing. And those two things are separate. Like you can be in the present moment and also have that drive to want to achieve things in life and want to be great. Like I could sit here right now and say, I can't wait for whatever is to come. I'm super excited to feel like just pumped again and motivated to create or to do or to be a part of something. And also right now, I am exactly where I am meant to be. And I can be present and want those things at the same time. I think there's a misconception that you can only be one.
It's that all or nothing approach of like either or versus why can't we be both, which is one of my favorite questions on the planet. And that's kind of where I want to take the conversation next. You and our good friend on the Chasing Edges podcast, Brian Peters, discussed learning the language of your physiology. I thought the way you guys categorized that was really cool. You know, the physiology being these sensations that we've kind of described, certain hormonal effects related to, you know, touch and the different senses and smell and posture and grounding and breath. And then taking that even deeper to, is it parasympathetic? Is it sympathetic? Is it fight or flight, rest and digest? Where does this language and how do we learn the language of our physiology?
Oh, I think I have a unique situation because I learn it in the water, and that's not for everyone. But I feel like I can take, 20 to 30 minutes and get in the water and, fart around and do whatever and swim, 10 laps total. It doesn't even matter how far. But in that amount of time, I can figure out what I'm resisting. I can figure out how my breath is. I can figure out what parts of my body are holding tension. I can figure out how my digestion feels. I can figure out if I feel inflamed. All of those things come online when I get in the water. Now, this could be the same thing as somebody doing any other activity or, ice and sauna. You can feel different sensations. But I firmly believe that when you have an external medium that calms you and brings you to parasympathetic just naturally, all of the other things come online that you can become aware of. So, for example, when I get in the water, if I am restricted in one side, I will know immediately because you just know. The water tells you so much because it's displacing. You're in this water displacement situation where you're being held. But if you feel like you are resisting something immediately, you will know. You will battle the water. You don't let the water take you. You just battle it. If you feel like you're not floating, if if your suit is tight, if you feel like you're gasping for air at every, you can feel that. And then you can take that and understand what's going on in your life. Like in a second, I can figure that out. And again, that's not for everybody, but the point of this is what settings make you feel safe, where you feel yourself and can come alive. Maybe that's laying in the grass. Maybe that's going on a walk. Maybe that's doing ballet. Maybe that's, hiking or getting a massage or breath work, meditation. But what parts of your life can you go to then observe what's going on in your body, to then give you information about what is going on in your life?
What advice would you give to people that don't know what that is, that they have this sensory overload? They grew up in a place that just had people coming and go, and they never really generated that safe space. How does somebody kind of derive that if they don't know what they don't know, right? They have an ideation around its existence, but they don't really know how to create that in themselves. So it's this constant, I just got to make it to my pillow each night.
I would say start with your breath. Lay on the floor.
Yeah.
Seriously, lay on the floor and download any sort of breath work, any sort of app that is meditation or breath work, and work on your breath and see how you feel. Because making decisions or trying to figure anything out when you're in that sympathetic state and you don't understand isn't going to go very far. So you've got to regulate first, and then you can start to become clear. But I will say this stuff isn't just happening overnight. Like you don't just figure out, how can I tap into my body? And I get this question all the time. Like, well, I don't understand. Like, what do you mean, listen to your body? Or I don't understand, from a somatic sense, like how can that help, like vagus nerve work, for example. How can that help calm you? I don't quite understand. And I think that's where the concept of thinking isn't for everyone comes back into play, because sometimes you can't intellectualize that change. You have to let go. You have to surrender and let go and use your body to initiate that change. And so again, there are so many modalities that will increase that, that dopamine or the serotonin or whatever you're seeking or trying to understand and look for. There are so many things that you can try. So start with your breath, lay on the floor, do that for a week, and I'm not an expert at this. Okay. I'm just throwing this out there, but see how that feels. And then start to explore what actually does make me feel good, even if I did it one time.
Mm-hmm. What I love about this advice is that it's simple. Everybody can do it. And I think leaning into what you described from Sarah Baldwin, SIFT, is a great way to navigate this, which stands for sensations, images, feelings, and thoughts. Because when you're lying there on the floor, those are all things that you can kind of lean into. Where are my thought patterns? Do I want to reach for my phone? Is my left shoulder a little bit tight? Why do I feel the need to get up? What's pulling my attention right now? Is my breath up in my chest and my neck and my scalenes, or is it low and slow in my belly? Do I only have a linear rise and fall, or can I do a 360 breath into, my obliques and my back? What's the angle of my feet? Why? What are some of the postural shapes that I've become accustomed to? Am I fighting that shape because, it was something that served me at one point in time, or am I allowed to surrender to allowing my body and my skeletal system to melt into the floor? And whoa, now all of a sudden we just asked some really valuable questions that can prompt and trigger some of the things related to SIFT. And I know SIFT is something you've explored a lot. I love when you describe SIFT, and I've tried to integrate it into my life and share it with others. Will you jump into that a little bit?
Yeah. So when I was going through a really difficult time, like a lot of stuff from my past was just like exploding in my body. And this is like in the middle of 2020. And it was just, the classic 2020 story of when we slow down and sit still, all the stuff started to come up. Right. So everything was coming up, and I had gone through that concussion, and it was just like, I could not for the life of me center myself. Like I couldn't, because I was trying to control it so much. Like every time I'd come to a session with her, she'd ask how this exercise went. And I was like, I didn't do it. I didn't do it because I feel like I'm losing control to just like sit down and take 10 minutes out of my day. Like that's how type A, like that's how avoidant I was of getting in touch with myself. And so we uncovered that and discovered that my avoidance of really understanding with and dealing with things that had come up for me in my past was causing me so much inner turmoil, tension, stress, anxiety, sickness, autoimmune stuff. I mean, you name it. It's like your body will tell you exactly.
The body keeps the score, right?
Keeps the score, hardcore. And so she said, okay, we're going to introduce SIFT. And so she introduced SIFT to me, sensations, images, feelings, thoughts. And every day I want you to write this down in your journal. And I want you to just write whatever comes out. You don't need to script it perfectly. So of course, first week I open my journal, I do it, and I'm like, okay, how should I feel right now? Like, what's the sensation I should be feeling right now? Okay, but yesterday was a good day, so like happy, and that's not even a sensation. You're right, but that's how disconnected I felt from myself. Is I was scripting, I was performing, I was doing what I thought she would want me to say, and I wasn't even doing the right things for each category. A happy isn't a sensation, like feet tingling or, traps, like tense or jaw clenched, and like those types of things were more descriptive. So I go back to her and like, I have this conversation about this, and, she's so gentle with her approach that it was so helpful, because she was just like, okay, we need to like, let's redefine these for you, not what you think I want to hear. And in that moment, I just started crying, because I was like, that's exactly what my whole life has been. And so I couldn't access what was going on in my body, because I was so concerned with the control of what she would think or what I'm supposed to do. So I want to say that first, because when you do exercises like this, it's very easy to get into the habit of just writing what you think you should.
It's almost like the spotlight effect, where you feel like somebody's watching you as you're writing and you're going to be judged for it. And I think that's the beauty of journaling, which is you can actually write and show it to no one. You could light it on fire. You could throw it away. You could rip it up. But it gets the ping pong ball that's bouncing around in between your ears out and gives it a placeholder. And then what you choose to do with that placeholder is up to you. So now it gives you an element of control.
Absolutely. And she looked at me and she said, not everything that you do needs to be explained to the world.
I love that.
Because at that point in my life, I was Instagram storying every damn feeling I had. I was posting every damn feeling I had. And that's great. Like there's space for that. But I learned in that moment that I was performing. I was trying so hard to sift and to do these things so that it was accepted. So I reset, I rebooted, and I just started writing really what I felt. And the next week it was all like super dark stuff, and everything was anger and tension. And then the next week it was a little less here and there. And then the next week, even a little less. Oh, and then it backtracks because nothing's linear. And then the fourth week is all anger again. And so I really started to understand, by writing down the sensations in my body, by writing down the images that I see, by writing down the feelings that I have and the thoughts that I create, or the thoughts that are in my head, that I am so far in I must be somebody for everyone else. I must control my image. I must force myself to, heal and do all this, that I was just disconnected. So it became even more clear throughout that process. So it's interesting. And this goes, to anyone listening or whatever you want to take from this, that when you start exercises like this, sometimes it's not just going to be obvious within a day. It may take 2 months of doing that same exercise and creating that habit and that routine of the same just simple task, not reading 20 self-help books a week, but just journaling a simple thing, that you'll then recognize and uncover what it is that is deeper within you. Because behind all of these things is a deeper meaning. Mm-hmm. Behind every SIFT, every day, there's deeper layers of conditioning, old thoughts, old expectations, old control. All those things start to come online because you finally have allowed yourself to just let it go. So does that make sense?
No, it absolutely does. And it's also the importance of you must take action in order to elicit the feeling. And when I say action, I don't necessarily mean like a physical action. I think it's almost like an actionable thought or an actionable decision. And I think you get to that point where I guess in AA, some people describe it as rock bottom. There's different layers, but it's like when you look yourself in the mirror and you look deep in your eyes, and you're like, who am I becoming? Do I like what I'm becoming? Is it what I feel like I'm supposed to do? And I can't help but think about yoga, for example. We're always looking at metrics, especially when you've been a high-level athlete. What are the times? What are the shapes? How do I compare to other people? But maybe what you're supposed to do is just be on your mat. Maybe the metric is, how present can I be on the mat? If I feel a certain sensation, can I put my breath there? Rather than, that person's tree pose is so much better than my tree pose. Why can't I get to that position? And it's this uniqueness around being more curious. And I think the action that I'm alluding to is exactly that. It's being more curious rather than allowing all the inputs that we've experienced up until that point to now influence and skip the messy middle and just go straight to the outputs.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Be more curious with yourself. And when you practice something like that and get into your body and start to discover that your body is sending you signals and information in order to make, quote unquote, make sense of this feeling, this control that you have, you then learn the concept of surrender and just kind of bringing this full circle. You're learning to surrender and you're controlling less and just being more. And that's a huge thing as we grow as humans is, we miss so much of life sometimes because we're not allowing our bodies to experience it. We're trying to intellectualize and control it with our minds. And when you see people, doing everything and you're comparing, yourself and your journey to everybody, because it's so easy to do now, you lose track of yourself, but you also lose connection with your physical body and you lose connection with that somatic nature and experience within yourself because you're thinking so hard. So allowing yourself to sift, allowing yourself to get into your body is another really good way that you can do that, other than, okay, I'm going to go online and everyone tells me to do breath work and ice and heat. It's like, well, what if I don't have those modalities? Okay, now I don't know how to do it. But there are so many ways that you can access that for starters in order to, get to the next level of your consciousness of your body, that how it's, connected to your mind and how that actually is the single most important realization you can have as a human being is the interconnectedness of yourself.
And I think that's derived through play. That's something that's coming to mind right now is, playing with blocks. Before it was like, no, you're supposed to build this way. It's this uniqueness around just, all right, I have this idea of what a castle's sort of like. I want to kind of create that where, I can play the role of this thing. And, that was before it was like, oh, I built this thing. Now let me get my phone and video the step-by-step process so I can share it to the external world. It decreases the power of a moment because you always feel like you're being evaluated. And that's something that comes to mind often is, certain things that we do in our lives, we feel like, oh, if the world didn't see it, then it didn't happen. I shouldn't give myself that social credit because there's no proof. But as children, it was like there was so much power in a moment. And I know you and I can relate to this, but it was also before DVR. It was before you could be like, oh, I could just watch it later when I have more time, or I'm just going to record that game and then I'll watch it when I get home. It was like, no, when that game was gone, it was gone. You had to watch the highlights on SportsCenter, which made that moment really special. And I read something the other day that really hit home, which was nothing made me faster and more athletic than when I was watching a show and I'm like, oh man, I got to go to the bathroom. Ran to the bathroom to take a pee. And then they were like, Bryce, the show's back on. The flips, the turns, the twists, the jumping over couches to get back to be able to watch something because I knew that moment would be gone. That psychology is kind of gone.
Yeah.
And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that? The uniqueness of a moment that you get to hold the memory in between your ears and then recreate that memory through storytelling versus it's always available. The power of the moment, doesn't have as much value.
I've been personally practicing this because it's easy to feel like you're not enough if you don't share everything in the moment about the moment. And then for everybody to watch, all 12 times over again within an hour. But allowing yourself to be immersed and more present, back to the presence in that specific moment is incredibly rare and really powerful, because we will always be, grabbing this and figuring out like, what can I do? What can I do, instead of just how can I be in this moment? But that analogy is so potent, because I can remember that feeling of hurry, like you got to watch this right now, and you're just like running back as fast as you can. Oh my God. That's how I grew up watching the Olympics as a kid, like you're going to miss this moment. Like you're not going to see it again.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when we went to watch the Olympic trials in 1990, we went to watch the Olympics in 96. My parents took us to Atlanta. And I remember that feeling of like, where would we see this again? Like, this is it. We're the only people that get to witness this, because I don't know that it was like very popular to tape it. And I don't remember. I don't think so.
I mean, quite frankly, it was a lot of work, right? Like you had to get the big VHS thing, or you had to put the tape in there, and like it was a lot going on there, versus now it's just the simple press of a button. And I think the simplicity of being able to recreate certain moments devalues them, and then makes it as if like, oh, this moment doesn't hold as much value because I could just text Caroline later. It's like, no, like this moment is never going to come again in this specificity. Let's make the best of now.
Yeah. Yes. Make the best of now in this specific moment, without thinking about the future, without thinking about the past. It's very difficult. In grad school, we had, our teacher drew 3 stick figures. And I don't know if I've told you this story before, but 3 stick figures, and the head is floating. And every day when we walked in, she would say, where are we today? Like, where are we? And it was past, present, future. The stick figures were past, present, future. And if the head is on a different, if the head's on a different figure, you have to center. Like you have to bring yourself to the present. And that simple exercise, which is very Stutz-like, by the way, with the stick figures, the simple exercise of drawing 3 stick figures and navigating which one of me is showing up right now. Am I thinking about yesterday or 10 years ago? Am I stressed out as hell about what's going on tomorrow, and I'm already planning my whole day, and I'm, going to town mentally stressed out, whatever? Or am I in this moment right now? Can I be here? And putting that little head of the stick figure on whichever of those figures, because you can't operate without the head. Like you have to have the full being all together as one. And when she would describe that, I just remember really resonating, because back in 2014, I didn't quite understand in sports psych, like why we weren't talking about that as much. Like it was so focused on just the mindset and the mental game. And she was such an abstract teacher that like brought in that whole body experience. That's how you're present. If you are in like the sacredness of the moment, but your head's somewhere else, are you really in the moment? If you're in the sacredness of the moment and your body's somewhere else, are you really in the moment? And so connecting all those together, and that's like my tangent about the present moment thing, because it's something I've been working on. It's something that I hear so many of my friends working on is, I'm here, but I'm not really here. How many times have you heard that?
Yeah.
I'm here, but I'm like not here. Like I'm showing up to the gym. I did the thing. I'm here, but I'm not really here. Like I'm not really present. And what does that mean? It means that the interconnectedness isn't really there. And that's the deeper version of like that, I'm going to miss the play if I don't get my ass back in the room kind of thing.
No, totally. I think the connection is huge, and not just physically being where you are, but allowing yourself to absorb and kind of be in the sponge of the moment, versus just like the location of your Google Maps, if that makes sense.
Yes. I love the sponge analogy. That's one of my favorites, of sponging it and then absorbing all you can, and then wring it out when the time is right, and start over again, because you can only take in so much. And so it's really being in that moment, absorbing everything you can, but not over inundating yourself to where you're now already in the future again. You're already thinking about too much.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the classic one that I think is helpful when it comes to all the information thrown at us today is we get a lot of information thrown at us that is about the future, fear.
And what's interesting too, something that's coming to mind as we're conversing is the social concept of patterns, right? We as humans, we do have patterns, and sometimes those lead to, as Stutz describes, the maze, or some people might describe that as the feelings circulating in like a fishbowl, where you can't really find your way out. So your pattern is when these things happen and you're triggered by this is your way of thinking. But the optimist in me loves to really truly believe that humans are incredibly malleable. And I think, all right, let's point this out. Let's make some observations. Based on that observation, let's paint perspective. Let's give people options so that way they have tools in their toolbox to make the appropriate decision to, if they want to stay in the fishbowl, that's okay. If they want out of the fishbowl and they want to go this direction, cool. Here are some tools and some permissions and some support. But I think what's sometimes interesting is that the word feelings, as we've described a lot today, immediately associates this woo-woo thought process that, oh, every time life happens, that's where you go. You're the feelings person. And it's like, no, I'm a human. We all navigate feelings and they come and go just like thoughts or cars traveling through a tunnel. But I think it's important to have these types of discussions to understand that like each moment we're slightly different, and to have expectations that humans are supposed to be the same every time they interact is, quite frankly, it's not fair.
Understanding patterning is a massive win. It's probably one of the most important things, if you ask me, because it is a very integrated process. Like, so I think before when we were talking about SIFT and I was saying how I was avoiding, so that's a pattern, right? When you can pick up on those patterns of, am I running away from this thing, or am I running towards it and getting curious and trying to better understand it? And there's a lot of similar patterning. We're all alike more than we are different in many ways. And when I heard that the first time, I was like, wait, what? No, like every human's unique, and that's true. But the patternings that we absorb throughout our lives can be pretty similar. And what pattern do we follow? It's maybe uniquely different. Mine may be uniquely different from yours, but the common thread could be the same.
Yeah.
And that fear and that avoidant patterning is a big one. And then the anxious, obsessive control patterning is another one. And we can have different patterns for different things, and different, things are going to remind us of different patterning. But understanding patterns is huge. And Sarah was another just massive example of that for me, just what I tried to control and what I tried to avoid, and how much information that can give me. And where I feel that in my body is exactly aligned with what's going on. Like you can feel it, because when I'm in resistance, when I'm avoidant, I will have every physical pain possible. like I will be headaches, neck, my left heel will start hurting again since I broke it a couple times. It's like, on your cycle, your cramps are horrible for women. Like you can feel, the resistance. All of a sudden you're like, this wasn't like this fucking last month. Like, why am I in so much pain? But your body's literally holding, because what are you avoiding? What are you not going toward and understanding? And then same thing with the anxious. It's like, you can find that pattern, but your heart rate's always high. You're always going. You probably feel freaking great because you're on a momentum roll and you think it's amazing, but really, are you regulated? So again, connecting those things and understanding your patterning can help you peel back the layers of what's going on in your life that you can better understand. And, with every theme we've talked about today, gives you all that information.
How do you differentiate between what to share, who to share to and what to hold on to. Because I think all of us probably have certain pains based on what we're holding on to. But then to be labeled as a complainer, or this person always goes too deep, or why can't this person just show up and do the task and, not navigate certain things. And now you carry the guilt and shame as if you were a burden on somebody else, when in your lenses, you're like, no, I was just sharing what I was feeling and the truth of the moment. And some people get that, some people don't. Maybe this is an empath conversation, but it's very interesting to try to filter that. Who do you share these concepts with without the element of judgment? And how do you read the room to know when somebody's able to receive versus when somebody's like, I got too much going on in my life, block, 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 block. And then somebody throws that at them, and then it just creates like this weird frequency.
Yes, great question. I think that's a lifelong trial and error as far as who you share things with, and you're going to make new friends throughout your whole life, and some of them can and some of them can't handle it. But I will say, if you feel safe with someone when they're sharing with you, and you feel safe when you're sharing with them, and you have one interaction of that to where they can listen, and there's not somebody trying to band-aid you or dismiss or say it's not that bad or whatever it is. If you have one interaction and you can feel like that's good, then I would share that with that person, because here's why. Practicing communicating what you need is so important. So if you have a friend, and this is something that my friends and I have just begun practicing, because for a couple years we would tiptoe around each other. Like one of us would get exhausted about this topic and no one would say anything. And then you have resentment, and then it comes up in a stupid little girl fight 10 minutes later, whatever it is, a decade ago, before you really understand this stuff, is saying, do you have the space for me to share this right now? Like, do you have space in your head, heart, body for me to just vent? And I don't need anything. I just need you to listen. But communicating that has completely changed all of my relationships. Completely. Because the expectation is set for the other person. They understand their role in that. They understand what their friend needs, that they just need to be there. And I think that can flow naturally. And then once you get that piece of information, you can start to have a better connection with that person moving forward, because you respect each other's boundaries. You understand what each other needs. And we've done that. I've done that with every single friend. Every single close friend of mine, it'll say, hey, I need your advice. Hey, I need to talk about this, but I need advice on this specific part.
It creates expectations, and then it shows a mutual respect for what other people are going through, and takes into consideration the bandwidth that they may or may not have in that moment. So that way it doesn't become a dumping relationship. It becomes this mutual exchange of energy, ideas, and patterns, really. And I think that's really important. I love the way you described that, and I think many people will be able to take that away with them. The last thing I'd love to discuss today is, we were kind of talking about patterns, and something that's been at the top of mind for me is concepts and principles. And what I mean by that is, in the fitness space, there's a workout written on the whiteboard. And I'll just use myself as an example for this analogy. When there's typically front squats in a workout, it really bothers my left elbow. So I personally prefer to do like a heavier goblet squat, and that allows me to get a similar modality. It's customized to my approach. And now I've realized, like, man, I can make that really hard, or I can make that a little bit easier. And I've done the dance. But in the beginning, it was, well, I didn't do the pattern or the blueprint that was written on the board. So now I'm less than. The room now labels me less than. And I have the maturity now to customize based on my needs. And on the broad and inclusive lens here, we go to a doctor, we have said symptom, they recognize pattern, they make, prescription, not necessarily the prescription of medication, but in some cases, yes. but sometimes the prescription of modality or what you do, and don't take into the consideration the customization of the human and the dosage that they may need. And that's what I mean with regards to the comparison between the goblet squat and the front squat, the dosage that I need, and customizing principles and concepts around patterns versus pattern recognized, open browser. Okay, we're going to do this protocol based on that pattern recognition. That is so robotic and dehumanizes the situation. What are your thoughts on that generalized description?
Well, I'd like to agree with you, or not agree, but I'm on your team about modifying things. I feel like I don't even know the last time I have gone to a workout and not had my own protocol of some sort with something, whether that's adding blocks to a deadlift or whatever. And then you become this, you attach the label to yourself, or you feel like other people attach the label to you. Mm-hmm. And I just pulled a Brian. I forgot what I was going to say.
I mean, just to piggyback off what you said, though, it's like you're still doing the generalized concept, but the specificity, it meets you where you're at. It matches your anthropometrics. It minimizes risk, right? If we want to make the doctor analogy, right? Like, oh, you can take this medication or you can do this protocol, but it comes with these risks. I mean, look at every pharmaceutical commercial. And if you do this and you're like,
right,
whoa,
right.
I don't even know what they said, but it didn't sound good to me. But I think people like don't grant themselves the permission, because this made up blueprint that is put in a public fashion is supposed to meet the pattern of the generalized public. But in reality, there might be minor tweaks that actually serve people better.
Mm. Well, I guess my question for you in that, just because I'm curious, is what's your viewpoint then on not being part of the generalized plan in general, not just in the gym?
I think it comes down to educating the individual. And so, they come into a doctor's office, and sadly, from what I've read and heard recently, the average time frame of doctor-patient right now is 7 minutes. And so that's not enough time to digest and create an understanding, because the understanding is based on what did you fill out in your questionnaire beforehand, numerical values, happy, sad, whatever labels, and doesn't understand the true frequency. It puts all humans in the same category based on previous patterns and science up until that point, versus taking into consideration the customization of the individual. And so that's the thing that I look at is, can we deeply understand the person? And that does take time, but I do think bringing these conversations to the surface can allow us to create protocols that better serve people in their journey, versus just like, here's the slip, here's the answer, and you gave that same slip out to hundreds of people before.
Yeah, I have a big allergy to that whole thing in general. I think, like you said, educating, but I also think communicating. And that's what now I remember my train of thought with that is if you don't have a proper communication between two parties with regards to this, you're going to have assumptions. And then when you have assumptions, you're not actually getting the full experience. Let's say, from your example specifically, if you never communicated, right? And if all you said was, it just hurts, I don't know, and coach said, okay, well, let's just do this, right? Then he's not educating you, but you guys are also not communicating about the topic at hand. So everything does go back to that connection piece, that communication piece, that understanding of change or lack of generalization of what everybody else is doing does not mean you're failing. It just means you have a different way of getting to your said goal of what you want to accomplish today, or, on a broad spectrum this month, for example, in the gym. I could go down such a big rabbit hole on the whole prescription thing. And here's your specific ticket to do this, because I think I saw a post on one of the girls that I follow. She's got a great perspective on this. She's a trainer for skateboarding, Nike. I don't know if Nike skateboarding anymore, USA skateboarding, one of the two. And it said something like, X amount of problems will be solved if we just have a conversation instead of just prescribing the thing and expecting the person to understand. There's so many more intricacies that can go into that education than just giving something and expecting somebody to do it. Like, you have to have the conversation, the why, the how, the feeling, the experience that you're wanting, and the onward like the ongoing check-ins. And that takes a lot. I mean, look, when you have let's say you're a football coach and you have a team of, 100 guys or whatever, it's like you can't be everybody's like confidant, or, like if you're coaching all these guys, you can't, but that's why there's 20 coaches on the staff. Like, everybody, like, having that interconnectedness of not everybody is this walking clone. Like, we're not all this clone of each other, but we all have our unique individual things that we need to understand about ourselves. And, we're all alike in that we have this need to communicate and to connect and to experience and to love and to enjoy and to have a goal and to have meaning and all of these things. And also, everyone has a different route to get there. Everyone has a different mode of learning that. And I think it takes a special situation, a special person to really be able to connect on that level. And I think we can all get to this point because we're run by these, like this is great, but it's I'm so grateful I can FaceTime with my family, like this, I'm grateful for that. Like, I live across the country from them. I'm grateful for that. I don't want to take that away, but it's also cutting the barrier of everyone has a unique feeling about them. And it's just sort of making everybody this like ingredient on the list. I don't know. It just feels like robotic to me.
No, totally. And that's what was so fun about this conversation today, was just challenging people to be more vulnerable and share their authentic truth with the world, and hopefully vocalize and communicate on a level where most people are thinking these things in some sort of mental chamber, and we're kind of allowing it to disperse and dissipate into the universe. Maybe similar to how a genie comes out of the lamp and starts to float and navigate with this magic associated with it. And that I think was the goal today, was to share some magic with the world, give people the opportunity to think and to be, and not place expectations on the past or the future.
I love it. I felt fully present here. I will say that.
It's super fun because I feel like we're playing ping pong back and forth around, like, hey, what do you think about this concept? What do you think about that concept? And
I love it.
It's fun to navigate that in a live format and try to digest thoughts in a relatively convenient and efficient space. And hopefully there's a lot of people to really lean into this conversation. And, if you have any thoughts, for those of you listening or watching on YouTube, shoot us a message. Caroline's on Instagram at Caroline Burckle, right?
Yeah.
Shoot her a message. Shoot me a message at The Real Bryce Smith or at CrossFit Invictus. And today was super fun. I always really enjoy being able to connect with you. And it's also so cool because, like, I chatted with you, I don't know, a few months ago or a year or so ago. And it's like cool to see the changes and the holding on to certain things, letting go of other things. And, we're so complex as humans, and it's just fun to upgrade our connection.
Absolutely. And, I know that we covered a ton of topics, but I think the goal is to take what feels good and resonate and what resonates with you in that moment, back to the moment. It doesn't need to be taking everything in and trying to apply every single thing every second. It's like one thing That's my mantra right now is like, how do you simplify your life? How can you simplify the things that you're absorbing and just take one thing and try and integrate that into your life in your own way? And so I think we gave a plethora of things that could be integrated.
Totally. Well, thank you so much for your time and your energy today. For those of you listening, if you enjoyed my conversation with Caroline Burckle, please rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And as always, stay on the hunt for who you've not yet become. Are you over 35 and in need of a solid training program? Are you looking to improve your athleticism and keep up with the younger athletes in your CrossFit gym? Then look no further than our Invictus Masters program. This program places year-round emphasis on mobility and stability exercises with movements that we have seen directly benefit our Masters athletes. Our program is led by Nicole DeHart and offers a training program designed specifically for Masters athletes who are looking to compete at a higher level in the sport of CrossFit. Some of our top Masters athletes in the world train with us, including CrossFit Games champion Kevin Kester, Matt Beals, and Pat Sprague. You can learn more about their stories and the Invictus Masters program by checking out their episodes right here on the Invictus Mindset Podcast. If you'd like more information about the current training cycle or to join the Invictus Masters program, please email Nicole at invictusathlete.com. That's NICHOLE at invictusathlete.com.